Welcome everybody to EU37, the big celebration about EU enlargement. Today at the day, it's the 1st of May, 2004. I was personally celebrating at the Austrian-Slovenian border together with Paul Rübig, the member of the European Parliament, because of the 10 new countries joining the European Union 18 years ago. In the meantime, we have Bulgaria, Romania, and Croatia as well, 30 new countries, 100 million new European Union citizens in the last 18 years. That's a historic achievement of the European Union. It's astonishing, actually, also the progress economically, politically, and security-wise. Just imagine in what kind of crisis we would be if Bulgaria and Romania would not be in the European Union and in NATO right now because of the terrible war in Ukraine. And we are much more secure because of EU enlargement. We are much more safer, and it's a time to celebrate this amazing progress. And that's what we are doing here today with Vienna Goes Europe. I would like to welcome Kati Schneeberger, our president. Thanks a lot for your leadership. You were the first one to do an event for EU37 in Vienna at the Diplomatic Academy with Ambassador Bimo from Albania, who I am very honored to welcome. Bravo, Ambassador. Thanks a lot for your time and for your support and your excellent speech and plaidoyer, I would say, advocacy for a united Europe together with Georgia, Ukraine, Moldova, Albania, Kosovo, Montenegro. This is really amazing support from your side. I just welcome all the new participants simultaneously. And then, yes, 100 million Europeans. I personally celebrated at the Austrian-Slovenian border. Many of us have celebrated together at this important day. And now we want to advocate for the next wave of enlargement, 9 new countries. And obviously also Peter is here from the United Kingdom to build a Europe which the United Kingdom wants to come back and joins in the future as well. That would be, of course, so important for us because it's such an important economy, an important ally in the situation in, of course, in NATO. It's the United Kingdom which was so decisive to save Ukraine. And we are all very grateful for your important contribution to the security of Ukraine, to the defense of Ukraine. And that shows how important it would be to have the United Kingdom back in the European Union in the future, EU of 37. And that is our aim. And I just want to outline, we have now the big summits on the 23rd of June. There will be the EU summit where the decisions about EU enlargement will be taken. And that is, of course, the reason for building a powerful network in the coming weeks and months in order to influence these decisions to make sure that enlargement gets a big boost with all our help and all the countries can join. That is the plan of EU37. I would like now to ask Kati Schneeberger, our president, to give her opening statement. Please, Kati, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gunther. Welcome to the celebration of EU enlargement, and allow me as the president of Vienna Goes Europe to call for a new drive for EU enlargement as part of the conference of the future of Europe. I call for EU membership of Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Albania, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Republic of Kosovo, Serbia, and Bosnia. In face of the Russian aggression and war against Ukraine, we have to enlarge the European Union much faster. EU enlargement is the European answer and contribution of the European Union to security, stability, and prosperity in Eastern and Southeastern Europe. And the enlarged Europe, including Ukraine and all 9 new countries, must be attractive to the United Kingdom to return the EU. All this must be possible by 2029. This is EU 37 by 2029, and we must prepare the public for that. We need effective networks in EU member states and in the 9 accession countries and in the UK to make that happen. Vienna Goes Europe will serve as a hub in Austria to change the attitudes of Austria politics and public on the enlargement debate. Third thing is to celebrate EU enlargement of 2024 to 2013 as major success. That is what we do today. And to make constant debate and public pressure, as we started with the 31 March EU37 panel debate in the Diplomatic Academy. I started with the campaigning during the visit to Albania in April, and I will visit all 9 countries until 2023 to campaign for EU enlargement. We will continue to make events and campaign, and I call all friends to campaign for EU37 together. We need a strong and more united Europe, including 37 members. That is why I say yes to Ukraine in EU, yes to Georgia in EU, yes to Moldova in EU, yes to Albania in EU, yes to Montenegro in EU, yes to North Macedonia in EU, yes to Republic of Kosovo in EU, yes to Bosnia in EU, yes to Serbia in EU, and yes to United Kingdom back in EU. Thanks for our friends and participation, and let us build a strong and powerful network for EU enlargement together.
Thanks a lot, Mrs. President. Excellent speech. This is the call of EU37, to be united, to be open, to be strong. I would like now to welcome all the participants, and also with a short question from the 10 countries, from the
Hello.
9 enlargement countries and the United Kingdom, to make a short introduction round. Mr. Ambassador Bimo, maybe first of all, we are very honored that you are here with us. And does Albania want to join the European Union? Just unmute yourself.
Okay, I hope that I am audible
Perfect.
now.
Very
Okay.
good. Welcome.
Well, Madam President Schneeberger, dear Gunther, dear old friends and participants in this online meeting. It's indeed a pleasure to be today with you. I don't know how much we will achieve to establish new friendships, which I think this platform is a very good venue for making use of it, to introduce to new friends and people that think along the same lines and very much like-minded. It's a great opportunity that President Schneeberger and Gunther thought about celebrating the enlargement. Is a milestone in the life of the European Union, which I think those who are in somehow do not appreciate as much as those who are out of this community of nations. And together with the pleasure and the honor that you have showed by inviting me to be part of this, I was thinking that indeed is a Sunday, and on Sunday people celebrate. But on the other side, I see this as much as a very hard work that all of us are putting together to lobby in favor of enlargement. And I pray that many others who do not think along the same lines as us would be aware of what we're doing, and the hopes and the desires of the nations that are in the vicinity of the European Union to become part of this initiative. So maybe I think we'll go a round of introductions, and perhaps we'll have the opportunity to say a few more words about the subject matter of the Albania stands and what are our expectations and hope. So in a nutshell, thank you very much for doing this. Happy to be with everybody else in this platform, and looking very much forward to a successful proceedings of this meeting today. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ambassador, for your continuous support. And we are all for European Albania. Join the European Union very fast. That's very positive for the security. And also Albania, a strong NATO ally. Let's not forget, since 2009 already, very successfully in NATO. Now I would like to welcome Professor Alush Gashi, the president of Institute for Foreign Relations of Kosovo, and also one of the founding fathers of the Republic of Kosovo. Professor Gashi, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Gunther. Greetings to all participants. Well, in Kosovo, we are really very grateful for all the support we got and we are getting from the European Union. Actually, every third Kosovars in different forms live in European Union, most in Germany, Switzerland, and other countries. And they have really become part of societies where they live, they are integrated, and in their capacity, they are contributing to development of European countries in politics and economy, in sports and arts. Every day, number of representatives in those countries, people who get elected, is increasing. The big interaction between Kosovars who are currently living in European countries are contributing to development in Kosovo and region in different forms. Of course, we have our hiccups between Kosovo and EU countries. Mostly has to do with visa liberalization, and all those issues are sort of creating problems in daily reality, especially after European Parliament has recognized over 4 years that Kosovo has fulfilled all the criteria for visa liberalization. But despite those problems, I strongly believe that Kosovo will continue to aspire to be a member of EU. We will do our best to fulfill all needed criteria. And we as a European nation, we have no other address. EU is our address, and we strongly believe that with the positive development process in Albania and North Macedonia in our region, we may even be blessed that we all jointly get to EU, which of course is a big skepticism in some of EU countries. But the situation in Ukraine is really unveiling new tectonic changes in global arena. And maybe EU decision makers may take into consideration to get some bold decisions. Now, it's widely known that the size of the country is not the most important factor. We have small countries who are really doing great contribution. For example, work of Albania in NATO and their openness and their chemistry for region stability and others. It's the best example that EU values have deeply penetrated in Western Balkans. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor Gashi, for your contribution and also for your clear yes to EU membership of Republic of Kosovo. Now I would like to welcome Nataliya from Ukraine. Nataliya Tereshchenko, please, does Ukraine want to join the European Union?
Thank you, Gunther. Yes, Ukrainian people want to join EU, and more than 91% of Ukrainians stand for EU and EU values in Ukraine. I was asked several days ago, how do Ukrainians see European values? And I want to say that we don't even call it into a question. We live European values in our daily life in Ukraine. And in my opinion, Ukraine can enrich EU with a lot of things, as democracy, as freedom of speech, as human rights. We stand for human rights, especially you see it when Russian side tries to take Ukrainians in prison. Yes, horrible facts when directors of movies got in prison, for example, and this was made artificially by Russian side. Yeah. I was living 9 years in Vienna, and I decided that I want to live in Ukraine because it is a very nice country. It is good to live there in Ukraine. I was already in Ukraine since December, and unfortunately on the first day, on the 24th of February, when the Russian invasion got us, I had to come back to Vienna again. And my life was ruined. All my plans in Ukraine were ruined by Russian aggression and Russian war in Ukraine. I think that Ukraine and EU can learn from each other. We can fulfill each other. We can learn from EU, for example, how to structure our systems, and you can learn from us, for example, how it is easy to make decisions, what is freedom of speech, what is to secure your country, which is the most important nowadays. Thank you,
Nataliya, thanks a lot. We are all standing in full solidarity with Ukraine, and it's really terrible what Russia is doing to you. And be sure of the solidarity of Vienna Goes Europe. You know that, and all the best. And thanks for your clear yes to Ukraine in the European Union. Thanks, Nataliya.
Thank you.
Now, I would like to give the floor to Ludmila from Moldova. Do you want to join the European Union?
Yes, of course. Not only I. The first, I would like to say thank you very much for inviting me to this meeting, very essential in my opinion. And good morning to all participants and dear Kati Schneeberger. Of course, to be part of European Union or to be citizens of European Union is not only my desire, is but also a desire of our people from Moldova. And the questions why, I think it's simple, it's visible, because we identify our values with European values, and I mean here primary democracy, human rights, freedom, and special now what is in the situation in Ukraine, the values which promote the peace and well-being of people. It's very, very important for us. We realize that the future of Moldova it will be in Europe only. And I think the development and the security of Republic Moldova ensure the security of European Union. That's why it's very important, the integration of Republic Moldova in the in European Union. It must be priority number one, not only for the government of Republic Moldova, but also for Brussels. And at the end, I can say, or I hope with your engagement, with our engagement in the future, I can say that I am a citizen of European family. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Moldova is very welcome in the European Union. Thanks, Ludmila, for your great effort, excellent speech, and hope for fast membership of Moldova.
Thank you.
I would like to welcome now our representative, Mr. Subotic from Serbia. Does Serbia want to join the European Union? Please, you're welcome.
Thank you. That's an excellent question, particularly now, these complicated times. We as European Policy Center keep arguing that enlargement needs to be re-energized, that Serbia and the other Western Balkan countries should be given a chance, despite some hiccups in the regional relationships and the relationships with the EU. We've been doing this for the past 10 years. We've marked our 10th anniversary as a think tank, the most highly ranked think tank in the region. We've been focusing on how to identify flaws of the enlargement policy, but also identifying flaws in policies of our government. So it was a two-way street always for us. However, in 2018, we've identified that the then enlargement policy is not going to produce the desired result, which is having Western Balkan 6 as future members of the EU. Later on, this was picked up by the French, and then we ended up with the revised enlargement methodology. So as early as 2018, we argued that there is an enlargement impasse, that the methodology is not specific enough when it comes to measuring the results in the region. At the same time, it's not incentivizing for the political elites and not producing tangible results for the citizens of the region. Hence why you can see that even in those countries which have a high level of EU support, for example, Montenegro, Macedonia, so not specifically talking only about Serbia here, you can see that their appreciation of the EU institutions, that is their level of trust, is actually quite low, and that they are increasingly even open for other geostrategic partners such as China. And we also, as European Policy Center, have also argued that the Western Balkans should be included for geostrategic reasons as well. Without including the region, we argue that the European project will never be fully completed. And the crisis in Ukraine has actually showed us that, reminded us that the only with Europe complete, we can talk about a complete and firm position of European continent as a stable, prosperous, and peaceful continent. That's all for now. I'm open to talk about our concrete proposals on how we can overcome this impasse, how we can operationalize the revised methodology, which hasn't really produced the desired results so far.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Subotic, Strahinja. I would like to thank you very much. Also, EPC Serbia is a very important policy think tank, and we are grateful for your participation and also for your contribution. Also, maybe in the future to work very closely together on EU enlargement between Belgrade and Vienna. That would be very good, because it's absolutely important to build a consensus for EU enlargement now in all countries. Of course, there are many complications, but we can celebrate this. Today, the 1st of May, is a big day for unity and enlargement. I would like to welcome and ask Peter Cook from the United Kingdom. Do you want to come back to the European Union?
One word, yes. But I'll add a little, if I may. Firstly, a heartfelt apology to all of our European friends here from UK. I'm taking Boris Johnson's voice in vain here. I'm apologising on behalf of all of the citizens of the UK for Brexit. We have noted, you might not have noted this in the press that surrounds our right-wing press, but the mood of Brexit has changed significantly here. Only the very hardline, noisy people that you hear of, such as Nigel Farage, still want Brexit. Many people who voted for it have gone silent. We've spoken to people all over. We've been campaigning for the local elections. People realised that they were sold huge doses of misinformation. Vladimir Putin sponsored Brexit to a high level. He came on the Western Front. Now he comes on the Eastern Front to squeeze. We must stop this. People are actually realising now that they were duped and lied to. So, however, I'm under no illusions that we've been very, very bad. We deserve punishment for our sins for a while. And until we have leavened and removed the culture carriers of Brexit, I think there are several conditions that ought to be put into the EU's procedures for letting us, considering letting us come back. One of them is that we cut out our English exceptionalism that gave us Brexit. There is proof now from economists. I was at a conference on Wednesday that 7 years of austerity produced a 4 to 12% swing in our right-wing UKIP vote, and that delivered Brexit. So we had that great big downturn, and then we were promised these sunny uplands. Yet sunny uplands do not exist, as I'm sure you know. So we must fight the forces that actually delivered this Brexit, and we must therefore properly understand that to join a club, you have to play with the rules rather than have your cake and eat it. So I humbly thank you for your invite, and I would love to come back when we're ready. I think we need a huge dose, not of cake, but of humble pie.
Thanks a lot. That was an excellent statement, especially also to show the Russian involvement in the Brexit campaign. This is underreported in the European Union. We should make it very clear there is a strategic threat to Europe from all sides, with the Trump support with Brexit, and now with this terrible war. This is the Russian strategy, and we have to fight it by more unity inside EU and NATO.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Peter. That's excellent. Now I would like to welcome Krassen, Professor Krassen. I would like to introduce you as one of the most important and famous professors of economics in Eastern Europe, one of the advocates for Bulgarian EU membership, NATO membership, and for EU enlargement already in the 90s, professor at the Sofia University, and a very good friend of Ukraine, has worked in all the countries of EU enlargement and performed excellently in assisting the economic transition of the countries to the progress. Professor Krassen, I'm very happy that you take time this morning. Can you share some of your insights? And also congratulations, because you are already in the European Union, Bulgaria since 2007, so you can celebrate. Can you describe a little bit how it is, and also talk about the EU enlargement? Thanks a lot, Professor Krassen, for your time.
Thank you, Gunther and Kati, for inviting me. I tried my best to be on time. I apologize to Macedonians and Albanians about what the Bulgarian government is doing to block their talks with the EU for the membership. So unfortunately, it's a political situation here, but I think we will change it. I don't know when, but I believe by the end of the year. I have 3 points to make. Number 1 is about life, number 2 is about economy, and number 3 is about the process of joining the EU. I think the latter should be changed, for the countries we are talking about today. Something about life. Europe is a symbol, and it's a symbol of freedom, and it's a symbol of civilization. That's why our countries, who joined in 2004, 2007, were basically supportive. Everyone, every strata of the society was supportive for Germany. But something about freedom, about liberty. The most important and most easy to detect indicator of well-being and freedom is life expectancy. People cannot be a little bit dead and a little bit alive. And if you take any population statistics, be this United Nations or the World Bank or our World Data, you name it, and you check the countries we are speaking about, including, I just checked, including the Balkan countries, including what happened after the dissolution of the former Soviet Union, which was a great civilization achievement, by the way. In 1990, 1991, what you see is that if the life expectancy of all the European countries by the end of the World War II was basically the same. So then in the eastern part of Europe, there was a bit of an improvement, very slow, until 1960. And then from 1960 to 1990, it stayed flat. And then in 1990, it started improving, the life expectancy at birth. It's just an amazing fact. nobody can explain this, why it happened, but obviously there is something involved with civilization and freedom. So this is confirmed by economic data. And if you take GDP per capita, for example, you will see that the new member states. That's why I shared one of the recent articles I had on the Meta related to COVID, but it has some economic background. So if you look at the GDP per capita for the new member states compared to the old member states, you see the same picture like with life expectancy. Until, after the World War after World War II, as World War I, everybody was basically at the same place. After World War II, Western Europe was a bit at the end of the 40s. It was a bit higher, so like 10 to 12 to 15% higher in terms of GDP per capita than the so-called EU. And then, during the communist years until 89, Western Europe went up, Eastern Europe remained at 1/4 of GDP per capita of Western Europe. And then there was a slow improvement. When the negotiations with the EU started in '99, so the average level of GDP per capita of New Europe was about 1/3 of Europe, of the European Union. And if you take it now, 20 years later, it's about 73% of EU average. Even Bulgaria, which is, because of many reasons, not the best performing country because of, reintroduction of central planning in the mid-90s. So even Bulgaria is about 61%. It will be 61, 62% by the end of the year in terms of comparison to the EU average GDP per capita. And my last point is on the process. I don't think that the deadline by 2029 is a proper message. We should call for immediate membership for one very simple reason. So the process is too political. It's related to different circumstances, and nobody can predict the circumstances right now because of the war of Russia and Ukraine. So what can be done? And this was messaged by a friend of ours with Gunther, Gerald Knaus, earlier this week. But I did the same before the annexation of Crimea. We had a meeting on 12th of March, 2014. Lots of famous people, Andrei Leonov from Russia, Warren Coates from the United States, Ivan Miklos from Slovakia, Enas Repas from Latvia, me from Bulgaria, Kaha Bendikidze from Georgia, with whom all of us and I personally was a friend. So we called for something to be done immediately, from one to the next day. And what we messaged then was, what you do first is liberalize the trade of Ukraine with the European Union unilaterally. It was done for the Western Balkans, and it worked tremendously well. So if you look at today's share of sources of income for the Western Balkans population, on average, 70 cents of every euro of income is because of the European Union, because of trading with the European Union, because having the opportunities to travel and etc. The second thing was free the labor market and movement, and no visa and no labor restrictions. It is actually happening with Ukraine. There is no reason this is not to happen with with the Western Balkans, or Moldova, or Georgia. That does not necessarily mean that people will immediately move, to Germany or Austria. This means that people are with a prospect for their future, nothing special. So this is the way the European Union can confirm the symbolic and civilization nature of the Union for the people who are outside the Union but wish to join. This does not necessarily mean that the entire process, legalistic thing, shall be changed. This may happen immediately, and this is the only assurance that it will happen legally and formally. Thank you.
Professor, thanks a lot for your powerful advocacy and explanation. In Bulgaria, you are very lucky inside already, and it is a big success with now 61% of the living standards of the European Union.
Yeah.
That's a big success, actually.
Part of it is because of COVID, actually, because GDP per capita, when you have less people, it's higher.
But Bulgaria was also in all.
Bulgaria was on the second place in the world in terms of death after COVID.
Can you shortly also, beside the major success of Bulgaria and the EU enlargement in general, with 100 million people now in the European Union successfully free, secure, and prosperous, can you also, about the situation in Bulgaria, maybe one question about the veto towards Macedonia and Albania? This was a very damaging thing. Do you see some light now that there will be a better European enlargement policy of the new government of Kirill Petkov?
Yes, it's much better than it used to be at the end of 1919 and in 2020. Last year we had 3 times general elections and 1 presidential election. So this stopped the process and had some sort of a rolling back, to very much xenophobic towards Macedonia attitude of the major political parties. But with pressure from inside, pressure from the European Union, and with this prime minister in place, I hope, and of course also the general situation is helpful. I think that by the end of the year we will have a major breakthrough in this, and this will be. They invented something which is not legally there. These political parties and the president of Bulgaria, they invented some constitutional issue to argue about with Macedonia, which is not part of any formal criteria for any country to join, and which is not in the contracts between the 2 countries, which is not in the decisions of different Bulgarian decision-making bodies, taken on the issue in the last 3-4 years. It's totally illegal. So, and this illegality of Bulgaria's veto is a very powerful argument, for the Commission in Brussels, to ask, for some explanation at least. And they're asking this, for already 17 months, I think. And one of the major driving engines behind the Prime Minister's efforts and everybody else for this opinion in Sofia is the Prime Minister's advisor on European issues. She's a former General Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Vesela Cherneva, a friend of mine, and a great friend of Macedonia. And she is also a vice chairperson of the European Forum for Foreign Relations. This is a think tank, which is basically very popular with most of the European and British, not only decision makers on foreign affairs. And I believe, they are doing the right job at the moment. But it's difficult.
That would be a wonderful celebration if there will be Albania and Macedonia and start
I
of
drink to that.
negotiations.
I
Cheers,
drink to that.
Shivili, and
Cheers.
also to applaud you, Professor, for your contribution and your speech, and
Gazua.
also the celebration. It's a celebration today, and the 1st
Gazua
of
to
May
all the Albanians,
is a
from
special day for
Kosovo.
all of us to celebrate EU enlargement. And I want to thank you very much also for your criticism that 2029 is too late.
So about the process, nobody knows, but the enlargement of 2004 was somewhat a tricky process. And one of the evidence for that was that on 30th of April, the Polish Sejm and the Polish Senate amended in one day 149 laws in order to join the European Union. This is very difficult to find the confirmation for that. You know, they typically, if you look at internet, different sources and that sort of stuff, they will say that the Polish legislature, they did, their best, to get the country ready. So the funny thing was that they amended 149 laws in one day. So why having this complicated process is totally unacceptable at the moment.
You absolutely.
The process, legalistic side of it, did not change, since 2004. When we have a completely different situation. We have Britain leaving, because of different complications related to this legalistic nature of the union. Of course, there were other things as a factor in Britain, of course, but yeah, Peter is taking to the floor. But part of the problem is that the union needs more freedom and more Britons than for example, I wouldn't give a bad example, but more Britons than Hungary, I think.
Absolutely, and I want to explain the 2029. It comes from the point that normally EU enlargement in the case of Poland took 15 years from the end of the Cold War to 2004. It's 15 years. And so because of the Euromaidan revolution 2014, I calculated 15 years plus, and that's 2029. So that is the logic of 2029.
One last point about the war. Kremlin doesn't like Europe. Kremlin doesn't like the culture, political climate, and the values Ukrainians and everybody else, who is around this table and who represents basically the orientation towards European values. That's the reason for the war. So how you respond to a war which is motivated by such reasoning? You just support these values. That's it. It's very simple. The situation is much simpler than it used to be in 2014. Unfortunately, with lots of victims.
This is what our President Kati has said very clearly, that EU enlargement is the answer to the Russian war in Ukraine, and that should be the line of the European Union. Peter has raised his hand. Please, Peter.
I just want to exercise a note of caution that fast decisions are desirable, of course. However, we are now experiencing the product of no regulation and no control in our economy. And the oft quoted entropy, slowness of the EU, I think it's an entirely fair point that if you're going to make macroeconomic, social and political decisions for 500 million people, you should take them carefully and slowly. We are now trashing human rights laws just because we can. So I think entropy and slowness, caution is good, actually. And I think if you're looking after a big group of people, you should carefully consider that. So I'm somewhere between the two of you saying, don't just go fast because you can.
Absolutely. Thanks, Peter. Just one moment.
One second.
Yes, please.
So this is one thing, taking economic or whatever exact policy decisions. This is absolutely different thing when you take, decision on being member or not being a member for new entrants.
Thanks, Krassen. We have discussed now about the economic aspects and the wonderful progress the countries of New Europe have made in the last 15 years or 18 years of membership. Now I would like to give to Mr. Subotic the floor. And please, your contribution, the Serbian perspective, the EU enlargement process, how do you see the situation?
Before I continue, I'd like to, Gunther, to ask you, could you repeat the 2029 perspective? How did you reach this year?
No, it's very clear because we have European Parliament elections every 5 years. So the next opening is 2024, 2029, 2034, and so on and so on. We can continue for the next 100 years to wait for Serbia or for Ukraine. It's one option. And, there's some people in Europe who say we first have to reform the European Union and to be somehow perfect. And then we have time for a new country. But Kati and our group of pro-European advocates, we say that we should be faster. I personally, I'm like a student of Dr. Busek. He recently passed away, and he was of the opinion to fast integrate all Western Balkan countries. I say immediately, basically. And he written a book about that one. But I personally say the countries which are foreign policy-wise aligned, that means NATO members, that means they are with the sanctions on Ukraine, who are completely according to the European Common Foreign and Security Policy. That's Montenegro, that's North Macedonia, that's Albania. They should be already allowed to vote in the European Parliament in the next time, in 2024. With the countries where there are more structural issues, obviously, because in Ukraine there's war, and in Moldova and in Georgia they are partly occupied. We have the issue of Kosovo and Bosnia-Serbian relation. It's all complicated, so I put 2029 as the target date, and also as a clear incentive to make peace. Because if we promise to the Serbs and to the Kosovos, to the Bosnians and to everybody, it's 2029, but please sort the remaining issues out. So there is time to sort them out. And there is also a clear target that we are very serious with the new countries. And such a Europe would be then very attractive as well for the United Kingdom, because we could say, okay, there would be maybe a Labour government coming in by 2029. They see we take more responsibility for our real problems in Eastern Europe. And then maybe the United Kingdom would say, good, this is the Europe of responsibility, and we want to join as well. That's the reason between 2029.
Okay, thanks
May I have a word?
for the explanation. Yeah.
May I have a word on that?
Yes. Didn't see who wants to say something, please.
Bimo Roland.
Bimo, ambassador, of course, yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, before going to this timing thing, deadlines and years, let me emphasize once more, because I thought I didn't do it as I should, showing solidarity with Ukraine and to Nataliya, and through her to all the Ukrainian people. We find no words to express our pain and bitterness to see what's happening there, and the enormous support that exists in Albania, not only Republic of Albania, but all where Albanians live. And I noticed this thing with Albanians living in Austria. So full solidarity. Now we were talking about timing, 2029, earlier, later. You will allow me to be very frank and straightforward. The situation within European Union at political level is much more serious and of concern than what we might think in the first glance. We from Albania are telling them for 2 or 3 years, let's start talking, not setting any date. And people in the capitals of member states don't understand that we're not talking about membership. We're talking about a process that will help us to come into line with European norms and standards that one day will allow us to be members. So this message is not received yet, that we are not talking about membership. We're talking about starting negotiations, and they're not willing to do that. And we are so much confused in Albania because we don't understand anymore how they function, because they have set up a commission, which is the specialized body to gauge, judge, measure the progress. And then for 5 or 6 meetings of the European Council, they do not trust their own institution, because Commission is saying, yes, Albania has fulfilled the conditions. And then the Council said no. And maybe one thing that perhaps not all of you are aware, what we did, you know, Macedonia indeed made the biggest step by changing the constitutional name. But it was not a smaller step what we did because of so-called, not so-called, but real trust. We noticed that there was a lack of trust about Albania being able to fulfill all the criteria. And 2 years ago, what we did with our judiciary, we have in the leading organ of the judiciary system in Albania, a foreigner sitting there. So it is considered to be the biggest concession on sovereignty of the country for the sake of becoming a member. So if there is any suspicion or doubt about the Albanian judiciary being able to fight corruption or not, now we gave the biggest concession, to say in other words, that a foreigner is sitting in the leading, the 3 top leading organ of the judiciary in Albania. And, you know, this trust somehow is not being taken from Albania to European Union, because in my judgment, then now I'm becoming very personal, I see that in the European Union, we are missing leadership. There are no people who can look 10, 15, 20 years from today. And they're looking after their narrow interests from one day to another, not from one decade to another. And I look very much forward that, as you said, June 23rd, we'll have a different decision by the European Council this year. But there is no much confidence in Albania that we will have a positive decision this time. And the direction that we are taking is that let us do and let us behave as if we are a member, and we provide the best what we can based on the European norms and standards to our citizens. And then when they are ready, let us start negotiating, because obviously we cannot force anything on the European Union, and simply waiting by fulfilling all the criteria. And it was a time that we were believing that geopolitics, strategy, the influence of other so-called third actors in the region would be an element in the discussion, that European Union would speed up a little bit of decision-making because the other actors who are active in the area. Well, as much as I like the argument, I don't think that this should be the main decision-making force behind the decision-making argument behind the discussion. Because first of all, is the criteria. Have we fulfilled the criteria or not? Because if we hide behind the geostrategic, then a lot of things are misunderstood. Of course, with the war in Ukraine, the Russian aggression makes things more urgent to be seen in the light of the geopolitics. And it was indeed very interesting to see what Mr. Cook, to hear what Mr. Cook said about the grand strategy of Russia. And it's indeed a great concern that we all have to keep in mind. But in one word, what I'd like to say is that the being judged upon fulfilling criteria and act in accordance with the values of the European Union should be the first measurement before the geopolitical considerations. Thank you, and sorry if I took too much of your time. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ambassador. This was excellent contribution and speech, and also thanks for the Albanians to be so clearly with Ukraine. Kati Schneeberger, at the visit you organized in Tirana, was able to visit the Free Ukraine street directly in front of the Russian embassy in Tirana, and also where the Ukraine embassy is. This is a very powerful symbol which Albania has done to rename that street and to be so strong supporter of Ukraine. I understand your frustration that the EU is going too slowly with enlargement, because Albania is a very strong ally and very much in solidarity, has accepted all the things and has regulatory aligned completely. And the question is really, what are we waiting for in the European Union? Because all the countries are ready for the European Union, similar like they were ready in 2004 in Malta or in Slovakia, or in 2007 in Romania and Bulgaria. And we have to change the foreign policy and the EU accession policy of the European Union. That's the whole idea of this movement led by Kati Schneeberger, to change the foreign policy accession consensus towards enlargement, similar like it was also in the 90s possible to do that. And we have to create this thrust for the common house of Europe, where we all united again. Thanks a lot. Now, Mr. Subotic has raised a hand.
Yes, I was going to talk about one solution that actually European Policy Center has proposed, and we named it the model of staged accession. So we published it last year in October, and since then we've been to so many different EU capitals. We talked to Paris, Berlin, we went to Dutch, Swedes, Czech, Slovaks, Italians, and Austrians, and so on. So I've been to Vienna recently as well. And I can tell you that the model at first was seen as with some level of reservation. However, one stakeholder told us that October of 2021 is not the same thing as February 2022, meaning that the EU officials are now more and more open to consider ideas on how we can incentivize the leaders to step up the game in the region, to step up the game in terms of rule of law, because we argue that although some countries may have aligned with foreign policy, there's a lot of work in all Western Balkan countries from the standpoint of rule of law, and this needs to be done before official membership. And that's why our model is not a shortcut for those who don't pursue full alignment on rule of law. At the same time, Serbia should also be incentivized not only in the area of rule of law, but also foreign policy. And I'll tell you how we plan to do it. So on the one hand, we understand that the process has been ongoing for too long. It's been 2 decades in the Western Balkans, no tangible benefits, because the model is binary. Either you're a member or you're not a member. So our model produces a more gradual integration. We talk about 4 stages in total. So there are 2 pre-accession stages and 2 membership stages. The pre-accession stages would be regulated by the existing legal framework, so no treaty change would be needed according to the analysis of our legal experts. We would use the current stabilization and association agreements and the revised methodology as a good ground to actually increase, on the one hand, financial funds, financial structural funds, cohesion funds for the Western Balkan countries. On the other hand, we talk about the gradual access to institutions of the EU. For example, those countries which have aligned with foreign policy of the EU, there is no reason why they shouldn't be sitting with their EU counterparts on meetings of mutual and essential importance. So we do believe that these 2 elements, more funds and more institutional access, could be incentivizing for our leaders to actually step up the game and to finally perceive the enlargement as something which is quite tangible. On the other hand, we also realize that the EU has legitimate concerns of how EU of 33 could, or 37 could function. Imagine 33 or 37 veto players. That I can imagine could be quite a realistic concerns in many EU capitals, not only Brussels. And that's why we argue that in the 2 membership stages, which we have named them, after a new member state signs a treaty of accession, they would acquire a membership status. Their citizens would become citizens of the EU. They would get 4 freedoms, passport, right to vote and stand for elections in the European Parliament, and so on. However, we introduced certain limitations, 3 key limitations. The most important one is no veto rights in the Council of the EU. So temporarily, we would actually call for a treaty of accession to make extensive list of temporary derogations, which is legally feasible, to actually limit the veto rights of new member states temporarily in the council. Then we would also temporarily limit the new member state of having a commissioner and having a judge in the Court of Justice. We have done so to actually tackle the concerns that the EU of 33 or 37 would be dysfunctional. We would argue that actually giving more time to new member states to actually accommodate, and the conventional members to also get to know the new member states, I think this would allow EU to become complete, to have new member states and to reform together from within, rather than just keeping the Western Balkans and other countries on the outside and just waiting for EU to reform itself for who knows how much longer. And finally, stage 4, which is a stage in which new member states would acquire, would take away the institutional limitations, which I have talked about. So I do believe that this is a way to go. This way, the new member states would actually have a more realistic perspective of joining. At the same time, new member states would not be a costly exercise for the conventional member states, because it's the veto rights which are the key reason why the conventional member states are afraid of having new members joining the club. Importantly, this would not be economically costly for the EU. The entire budget GDP of the Western Balkans is the size of Slovakia, so it's economically feasible. It's legally feasible. As I mentioned, temporary derogations have been used in the past to limit the labor rights, for example, for 7 years in the new countries after 2004. There are also derogations from applying certain environmental directives and so on. So we are arguing that we should be creative, we should actually be bold, and actually use this crisis to actually finally unstuck the enlargement, because we agree with all of you that enlargement was and should continue to be actually the most successful policy of the EU, not only from an ideological standpoint, but also from practical standpoint, because Western Balkans are one of the key elements for actually also tackling the Ukrainian crisis. I think it's a good thing that all countries in the Western Balkans have condemned the Russian aggression. Not all of them have actually imposed the sanctions, but actually I'm quite optimistic that with this model, I think that the costs of imposing sanctions could actually be mitigated, because the EU perspective would finally become a realistic chance for those countries which have been standing in the line in the queue for the past 2 decades. I tried actually summarizing the model in this short period of time. I'll send you a link. It's called Template for Staged Accession, and you can read it. It's now available in the chat. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Subotic. That's an excellent idea. It's a kind of membership minus for fast accession. And that's, I think, one feasible way to go ahead, yeah, and to have a full membership, but under certain restraints and conditions, which in a way Bulgaria and Romania had as well, because it was later introduced to have a supervised budgetary kind of, it's called certified verification mechanism, yeah, which is something similar in a way, but retrospectively.
And if you take a look at the polls in Bulgaria and Romania, their citizens support this cooperation and verification mechanism. It's a post-accession conditionality, which they believe has helped their countries reform. And they also think that this mechanism should stay in place, because there is still more work to do. And in their example, we can see that they don't consider themselves to be a second-class citizens of the EU. And at the same time, our model would not turn Western Balkans into second-class members, because the institutional limitations which we have called for would be temporary. It would buy us more time to showcase that we're serious members, and also allow the EU more time to reform itself and potentially move away with unanimity voting in some areas, and potentially extend the QMV areas in which this system could be used. So this way we can have convergence between EU reform and EU enlargement.
There's also this excellent proposal of Gerald Knaus for the European Economic Area, but I think your proposal is more political integration with some caveats, which I think makes a lot of sense. I tend to reiterate that I also made a very important, I think, peace proposal. As an economist, I'm very much in favor of adopting the euro prior to accession in order to speed up EU tangible results, because the voters of Serbia, for example, would see that they have the euro already as a currency. And I have just today published it in Kosovo, the proposal for the recognition of Kosovo to get the euro as a currency for Serbia, to incentivize and also support the politicians, if they want to be for peace, that they have something tangible to show to the population immediately. I'm also calling for the same policy in Albania and Macedonia, and also in Ukraine, to use the euro more forward-thinkingly, and now basically to stabilize Eastern European economy in the face of the war, but also show the population that we are very seriously with EU enlargement. Good, more questions and comments. I open the floor to some of the speakers. Have we a participant from Georgia? And others from Ukraine?
Well, I'm from Ukraine.
You're welcome. Make your statement. Are you for the EU membership of Ukraine?
Yes, but I was already talking, and I see there is one another person, Ksenia Pidruchna. I don't know if she is from Ukraine, but it seems like. Maybe
no,
not.
she doesn't want to talk, no problem. Nataliya, just can you describe, because the situation has changed dramatically with the Ukraine war, because Mr. Zelensky is now such a powerful communicator. He has turned with the war into one of the most important personalities of the world, and he has decided, with his appearance in the European Parliament, to focus his communication power globally on the EU membership of Ukraine. And this basically has transformed the whole accession process, because suddenly such a powerful person like Mr. Zelensky, in this existential crisis of Europe, where Ukraine is attacked by Russia and also the whole of Europe is threatened, Mr. Zelensky has devoted his energy not only on the defense of Ukraine, but also on the EU accession. And this is the only thing which really changes the debate here at the moment, because he has such a moral authority and political clout at the moment, that Mr. Michel and Mrs. van der Leyen and Roberta Metsola, the three most important personalities of the European Union, have really gone out and said very clearly they are in favor of that one. We have a situation where the Germans, the Austrians and the French, and also to some extent, of course, the Hungarians, which are completely gone towards the Russian camp, unfortunately, but the three most important countries in this debate, the Germans, the Austrians, the French, are very reluctant to grant this. But here comes the opportunity, and it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the Western Balkan countries to piggyback on this powerful Zelensky's door-opening effort, which is very hard for the Europeans from Germany and from France and from Austria to resist. Because why? Because the Polish, the Central Europeans, the Baltics, the Northern Europeans, and of course the Americans most of all, are 100% now in favor of giving Ukraine this essential moral booster of a EU accession perspective. And so my guess, it will happen. But what is unfortunately the problem, that the Western Balkan countries are not active enough to use this momentum to also support this EU accession perspective. We should be all together in a kind of coalition for enlarged Europe. And that's, I think, the opportunity here now. And that's the second part of the debate. Can we use this momentum here? What do you think, Mr. Ambassador from Albania and also from Serbia, also from Kosovo? Can we use this momentum for peace now that Mr. Zelensky has created?
Can I just introduce a colleague before that question is answered?
Please, Peter.
I have my friend here, Irina, from UK, who works with me on the streets and in all sorts of other ways to turn the minds of the British people towards more global perspectives and more unified perspectives. She's not a frequent speaker, so I won't force her into speaking, but she has the great privilege and insight of having lived in Russia originally. So she sees the pain of the Ukraine situation from a Russian perspective. But absolutely, Irina, I haven't asked you to speak. If you want to, you can later on. But I just thought I'd introduce her.
Thanks a lot.
Welcome. Thank you, Peter.
Very good. I see that a lot of British people interested in EU37 joining back. That's what we definitely support. And be sure we have all the efforts of welcoming you. But next time, if it's possible that you join fully the European Union, that would be wonderful. Also with the European currency and with the whole foreign policy, that would be excellent.
No cake, no cake.
Yes, Peter, absolutely, you're correct. Yeah. Thanks, Irina, for joining our debate on celebration for EU37. Yes,
thank you.
Can we build a coalition of pre-accession from Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, and the Western Balkans? Can we make sure that also Ukraine and Georgia join the Central European Free Trade Agreement, the Regional Cooperation Council, and that there will be one common visit maybe of the Western Balkan leaders to Ukraine? That was discussed by the new Prime Minister, Triton Abazovic from Montenegro. He has made this proposal, and imagine what a powerful show of united Europe that would be if all 6 prime ministers or presidents head by train to Kiev to support Zelensky, who has basically done more than anybody for the possibility of enlargement to be really revitalized by his decision to use the power he has now to focus on that one. And it would be also very nice to say thank you to him also from the Serbian side. Maybe Mr. Subotic, can I give the floor to you and describe a bit the Serbian position, because beyond all celebration, it is a bit complicated what we see with the lack of closing of the airspace. Yesterday, Mr. Vucic has nothing better to do than present some Chinese anti-aircraft rockets, which he recently acquired with the subsidies of the European Union taxpayers, as we see it in Austria, actually. And he has also bought some Russian fighter planes. So not everything is bright in Serbia on the European side. And maybe can you outline some of your perspectives on that one?
Absolutely. I can tell you that it's true. We've seen some pro-Russian rallies in Belgrade. However, and these images have circulated the media. However, I'd like to point out that typically the extremists are the ones who are the loudest. However, the extremists are only few in number, and that these images do not represent the overall position of citizens of Serbia. In that regard, we've also had pro-Ukraine protests, which unfortunately, pro-Ukraine protests of support, which unfortunately did not grab the attention not only of domestic media, but of international media as well. It does not sell as well, because when something is extreme, it's easy to catch on to. When it comes to Serbia, I was actually cautioning always against automatically disqualifying Serbia simply because it didn't impose sanctions. Because in Serbia, things are not black and white. I would actually argue that the structure is set up in such a way that it's not about Vucic. We shouldn't talk about his persona. I do believe that anybody, any other politician, had he or she been in his position, would have chosen a similar way of acting or responding to this crisis, and there are several reasons, and not all of them are rational. It's actually 3 elements. One is rational, the other one is emotional, and third one is a mixture of rationality and emotions. I'll start from emotions. Definitely, although Kosovo is pursuing its path towards the EU, It's been recognized by half of the world. For Serbians, if you take a look at the polls, any official recognition of Kosovo is unacceptable. So in that regard, they see Russia as a key ally to their cause, and that's something that comes to play as an important emotion. So turning their back against Russia fully by imposing sanctions, they would feel this emotion being betrayed. The same applies to the trauma of NATO bombing from 1999. People still have it in their hearts and minds, and they see Russia as a player who at that time would not accept NATO bombing. And for this reason, they continue to argue that the bombing was illegal and something that was unacceptable. So emotions play an important role. Secondly, a mixture of emotions and rationale is today's Russia's opinion in the position in the Security Council of the United Nations. They are afraid that if they turn their back against Russia, that Russia might pull away their veto, and then they would lose their leverage over Kosovo. And thirdly, the rational approach is the energy. We are highly dependent, almost fully, on their gas. They are owners of our oil industry here, majority stakeholders. So all of these elements showcase that Serbia is not in a position to easily and fully and quickly align with the sanctioning mechanism. However, I would argue that I see actually positive signs that Serbia is willing, but slowly over time, to actually align its position with the West. I'll tell you why. So far, we have endorsed two resolutions in the United Nations. One treating Russia as an aggressor, and another one from the humanitarian standpoint. I think this is historic because 2 months ago, this was unimaginable. Serbia condemning Russia for anything. We haven't done any we haven't adopted any resolution that even indirectly hurts Russian interests. So I think this is a good starting point. Then we aligned with 6 EU declarations. This was also unimaginable. I've been tracking Serbia's alignment rate with EU declarations, and since 2008, we haven't aligned with any declaration which targets Russia's interests directly or indirectly. So this is the second reason why I'm optimistic that over time Serbia could slowly but surely change its approach, and why it should be given a chance. Thirdly, we see the change in media. Up to the UN General Assembly vote, our media was saying, one media even argued that Ukraine attacked Russia, pro-tabloid media. They were saying that Putin is there, is a hero, blah, 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 and so on. They were praising Putin. But after Serbia's vote in the United Nations, you see the change of narrative. Putin is not mentioned anymore on our cover pages. The tabloids argue for caution. They're afraid of the escalation and so on. And finally, we even saw 2 days ago when Putin was talking about Kosovo, how it's a similar situation in Donbass and so on. You saw tabloids even arguing that Putin stabbed Serbia in its back, that Putin is betraying Serbia by using this as a bargaining chip with the West. So you can see that in just 2 months, Putin was a hero. Ukraine attacked Russia. Now we see Ukraine fighting for its life and Putin betraying Serbia. So by building up this momentum over time, I think this will also give our government more space and more maneuver to sell certain sanctions if they decide to impose them in the future. They wouldn't do it openly and brag about it, but they would still apply some sanctions. We've also applied sanctions to Yanukovych and his 16 colleagues. We haven't aligned with any sanction before. This is one. We have also voted to kick Russia from Human Rights Council in the United Nations. So this is another form of sanction. So therefore, I would say that a more careful look to Serbia's perspective shows a willingness to align, but not as quickly, possibly as the West expects it to do. That's why I'm arguing that Serbia deserves a chance, and that we as civil society are actually key allies which have condemned the Russian aggression, but also who have given to the EU more details on Serbia's particular position in this geopolitical situation. So yeah, hopefully this made it a bit clear that Serbia is definitely not out there to be easily disqualified. And I do hope that the West will keep Serbia and other Western Balkan countries on their radar. We have the Conference of the Western Balkans under the French presidency. Then we have the EU Western Balkan Summit under Czech presidency. So as we talked about a model of stage accession and other models. More incentives are needed for the costs of sanctions to be mitigated and also for the EU to be brought back on the agenda. Thanks.
That was very, very informative and very good statement. Thanks a lot, Mr. Subotic. The question is also, is there a chance for a joint visit of the Western Balkan prime ministers to go to Kiev together?
Well, two issues. One is as I mentioned, Serbia would impose sanctions, but would not brag about it. So this would be, in a way, bragging about turning their position against Russia. So they would do it, but not as openly. So that's why I'm skeptical about the visit. And secondly, I don't see Vučić standing next to his Kosovo counterparts in Kiev when the world is watching. So that's another issue that complicates or decreases the possibility of joint visit to Kiev.
Mr. Ambassador, you had a question?
Not a real question. I just wanted to add up to fill in with the question that you asked about the peace support and joint visit to Kiev by Western Balkan leaders. I think, very much share Mr. Subotic what just said about the joint visit, but I think all of us are going to act in their own small ways. Like a few days ago, the Speaker of the North Macedonian Parliament, Mr. Tereshchenko, was in Kiev for a visit. And on Tuesday, President Zelensky is addressing the Albanian Parliament, and Prime Minister Rama has expressed his willingness to be there anytime possible and in any format possible. So, dear friends and participants, in Albania, we feel very much that this is our war too. And I very much share what Professor, I think, Krassen from Bulgaria mentioned that a little earlier, that what Putin and Russia is doing in Ukraine is somehow fighting against what Ukraine was after, what Ukraine was watching the perspective. It's exactly the European values that were being kind of developing there that hurt Russia a lot. So we feel that in no way we have the luxury of allowing Mr. Putin and Russia aggression to succeed even in the smallest way. So, I don't have enough information from Tirana and Albania what are next steps in this peace supporting initiatives, but I can ensure you that all what is possible to be done will be done by Albania, and we have to admit that this is a very, very difficult situation with frankly speaking, we all know what's happening, but long term, it would backfire in such an enormous way on those who started this war. What timing is difficult to say, but all this so counterproductive. And I think one message has to be taken home by all Europeans and perhaps even the US, that a long time ago, I've been dealing with security issues, and the mantra of all involved at that time was an ounce of prevention is much better than a ton of reaction to a crisis when it happens. And I think not all of us, I mean, not Albania, but all of us that are around this table or the international community, did not do enough to prevent this at the time that it was obvious that it was coming. But if you remember, even in the few days prior to the aggression, there was very much skepticism. Now, is it true that they're going to invade? No. Is it going to attack? No. Yes. Who has the information? So I think more should be done in the future to prevent. And again, we come to this celebration that EU is such a formidable edifice that can protect everybody, can give maximum protection for such things, not to suffer in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Ambassador. This is the whole reason for this celebration, because the countries inside are safe. We have also the mutual defense clause, the Article 42 in the EU treaties, and inside the European Union, obviously economically, socially, but also security-wise, it's much safer. And that's why it's much fairer to be faster with EU enlargement, to have Albania, Georgia, Moldova, all the countries inside the European Union. Thanks, Mr. Ambassador. I would like now to go to how we can cooperate in the next 8 weeks, because the next 8 weeks are very important. We have exactly 8 weeks for the 23rd of June. There will be the big summit. Do you think that we will have a breakthrough on the enlargement side in the next 8 weeks? And what we can do between think tanks, politicians, and diplomacy to really achieve it? And can we make some kind of joint activity on EU37 in Serbia, in Albania, in Austria, Ukraine, to focus the energies of all of us together to achieve a breakthrough at this big summit at the 23rd of June in 8 weeks from now? Please, Peter. Unmute yourself.
I have no right to say anything as a member of Brexit Britain. However, I can urge all of you to not repeat our mistakes and seek unity and do whatever it takes in the time. I mean, I said earlier that, big decisions take time, but actually when a deadline approaches, one has to unite. So I think it is time, whilst we're away on leave, you need to find a way to unite around this deadline. And that's, I don't have the right to even tell you that, but I've said it now.
Peter, by the way, the United Kingdom is the most important European ally in NATO, and you are very decisive for everything what is happening in Ukraine. And by the way, you are one of the most powerful communicators in English. And if, for example, your movement is supporting EU enlargement and makes that a case, it's also quite useful, to be honest.
That is all we have left you with is our language and our aggression. And
millions of activists in Europe who are listening to you, because you have a good communication basis. So.
I find it interesting that Mr. Johnson is applauded very sensibly by Mr. Zelensky, because he has to do this to everyone. But the truth is rather more that Mr. Johnson is rather desperate, I think. Anyway, we're not going into boring UK politics. We left. We must get over it. But actually, seriously, if you have a deadline, now is not the time to pontificate. It is the time to unite. That would be my. I would implore you to do that, actually, and we'll join. We'll help you wherever we can.
Thanks
I will second that.
Sorry, Irina, I didn't hear.
I just said I would second that.
Very good. Please, Mr. Subotic from Serbia.
Yes, I'd like to tell you that we as European Policy Center will definitely continue advocating strongly in the next 2 months for a model. We oppose some of the tendencies which we see of certain models which call for deeper integration without official membership. We do believe that any such alternatives could be damaging, considering that Western Balkan citizens have EU projects as part of their DNA. They would feel betrayed in a way if something is promised without guaranteeing membership in the future. while putting the membership off the table, because it's not about money. It's not only about exploiting the EU. It's about becoming part of the European family, and we should always have this in mind. Sometimes I'm surprised by some people, stakeholders, easily believing that simply by giving money that everything would be sorted out. But I do believe that sense of belonging, ending up as EU citizens or having their voices heard in EU institutions is something of a big value. If you take a look at for example, at Eurosceptics in Serbia during the recent presidential debates, the Eurosceptic club was actually, or anti-EU club was actually calling for deeper economic integration, something along the lines of EEA without official membership. They would be the happiest about it. So that's why endorsing potentially any such alternative model would only contribute to EU skepticism, to those who argue that we should never impose any kind of sanctions against Russia, that we shouldn't even condemn Russia. That's why pro-EU movements, think tanks, and other organizations should be endorsed by the EU officials. Luckily, we as European Policy Center are quite influential, and we can knock on the door and we can have the doors open. But other countries, other think tanks from the Western Balkans should also have their voices heard, and they should always remind the EU counterparts of the basic fact, which is the EU membership should always remain a priority. And that's why any other alternative should be regarded as unacceptable.
Absolutely, a clear yes to political EU membership of all the Western Balkan countries and Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. This is a very powerful message. If the European Policy Center is clear on that, that is very helpful. Also, maybe you can help us with contacts to Bosnia, Montenegro, and also in Macedonia, because there's also many friends there, I'm sure, who are pro-European. And that would be also very interesting for a future Zoom conference or for future events, which we plan to organize in the coming 8 weeks of decision-making on EU enlargement. If we cannot change the German, French, and Austrian positions in the next 8 weeks, and then we might have a very, very big setback in the 23rd of June, and that would be setting back EU enlargement for maybe a long time. So it's now very important, please.
I'm quite optimistic about the French, to be honest. They were the first ones to openly welcome us, both in Brussels and Paris. They even helped us meet the current presidency trio with all the key institutions, and they were quite open-minded because they were the ones to propose the revised methodology. They see that it's not being operationalized. They do realize that opening a cluster, closing a chapter is not a tangible benefit they were expecting for. What we need is a roadmap for functioning of democratic institutions. And as I mentioned, opening up the institutional space and opening up a possibility for additional funds. They are open for it, and they are actively talking to their counterparts in Berlin. I'm also sending you a link of our regional network. It's called Think for Europe Network. They're true allies to the European cause. And if you need anything from them, you feel free to contact them. It's a group of 6 think tanks from each Western Balkan country. Think for Europe Network.
Very good. And also to connect this group with Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, because now we will do several visits. I will go to Moldova next week, and then end of May, we will go, Kati, Schneeberger, and me will go to Kosovo to promote EU37. I plan a visit to Georgia in June, and so to basically spread a kind of coordination message that we all want to be united in the European Union. Together with the British back, we will be 37. And that should be a coordinated effort of the foreign policy establishments, of the think tanks, of the activist movements, and then we will be much more effective together. Please, Mr. Ambassador.
Yeah, I don't have much to say, but just wanted to inform about the visit of Commissioner Enlargement, Mr. Verhey, that visited Albania 2-3 days ago. And from his public statements, one can reach the conclusion that it is very much up in the air. It might be a positive decision for starting negotiations with Albania on June 23rd, but very much is open and maybe not. On the subject, what can and should be done, I think the situation is rather complicated. First fact that I'd like to underline is that all of us in the region are in very different stages of rapprochement with the Union. Serbia, Montenegro, they have almost finished the discussion about chapters. We have not started yet in Macedonia. And then Kosovo and Bosnia are even further away from that. So there is, what I'm trying to mention here is that there's not much ground for a common effort towards the concrete steps to be taken, because we have different needs. But of course, all of us join you and the group here and many other institutions, and very much, thank you very much, Mr. Subotic, for the group, that I make it known to other people in Albania, by the way, which they might know already because they are very much in connection network. So in addition to that, what makes me be a little cautious on what can be done is the fact that if you watch the support in public opinion about the enlargement in countries like, even including Austria, is not something that we can rely upon building momentum for enlargement. And it requires more leadership rather than public support. So I think what I can say from Albania, what we are aiming at is reaching the top decision makers more intensively during this time, and trying to make our case that will be only in the benefit of the European Union if they start the process of accession, not necessarily mentioning a date for accession. So I'm going to end here saying that we still are hopeful for next European Council, but not certain. And it looks that we're going to aim more at the decision makers at the highest level rather than appealing the public opinion. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Ambassador. Of course, it's not decided. Of course, it's unfortunately not decided. And of course, we will need support by the Americans. It's absolutely essential that the American powerful diplomatic effort is pushed behind EU enlargement. And that's absolutely decisive that this is happening. And also the British, actually, that they very much support EU enlargement perspective in the coming 8 weeks. And Peter, you have raised your hand.
Yes, having argued that complex decisions require time, I'm going to argue the reverse of this. The musician Brian Eno talks about simplicity. So does Einstein, of course. He says, I have 1 bar of soap for washing and shaving. Yeah, things should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler. What I found is one of the more persuasive arguments I had with people in this country, and have still, is the notion that it costs 37 pence of our British pounds to belong to the EU for 70 plus years of relative peace. Now, that's a really simple point, but actually for people that don't have the education, that's actually the one that's stuck with them. So we all have our complex arguments, but where a deadline approaches, I think we need to borrow Einstein's principle of simplicity to explain that half a chocolate bar is all it costs to belong to this union for all this social and other benefits. So I'd urge you also to borrow from Einstein.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Peter. It's quite simple. We all want to be in the European Union. I was personally active as a student in '94 in the campaign for EU referendum of Austria. And our country has tremendously developed because of EU membership. We are much more open, prosperous, and successful nation. And the same is true for all the members of the European Union, the 13 countries which have joined in the last 18 years. And now there's 9 new countries which have this wish to join, and they would benefit a lot, but we all would benefit a lot from a larger market and a more secure Eastern Europe, because the costs of such a terrible war are enormous on human life, on financials, on the damages. So the security of Eastern Europe, that's what the European Union ultimately is made about. And that's why we have it, to secure Eastern Europe and to give them a prosperous, stable framework for a good life. And that's exactly what we have successfully done with the first 13 countries. Now the next 9 countries to come. And we are very happy with the leadership of Kati Schneeberger, a young, rising and upcoming politician from the Green Party from Vienna, to be the president of Vienna Goes Europe, this NGO. She has started this consultation process in the conference of the future of Europe in Austria, especially to involve all the new countries as well, to be involved. And because unfortunately the EU has decided to not involve them, but Kati has made this effort and is now very active in the Green Party to promote EU enlargement. And in the next 8 weeks to build a network of all the 9 countries together with the UK to influence these decisions via the Austrian Green Party, via the German Green Party, via also all other parties, obviously. But this is a good opportunity. And if we are all very active now in the next 8 weeks, maybe we have this big achievement of opening the European Union and setting up a decade of EU enlargement, which has been so beneficial for us in the 2000s. And then we had lost a decade in our internal crisis. And if we can re-energize and revitalize the spirit of the 2000s, of 2004, of the 1st of May 2004, that would be really very good economically, strategically, and socially as well for everybody involved. And that would be another 67 million Europeans safely inside the European Union. It's not, then of course, if the UK comes back, it's another 67 million. But first of all, the priority also, Peter, understand, is to secure the Eastern European fragile periphery inside the European Union. And that's, of course, so important. So that was the call for EU37. Whatever you can do in your communication channels, in your diplomatic networks, in your various countries, please do that. And now for the next 8 weeks, we have really this opening, this historic window of opportunity for EU enlargement. And if we can achieve it now, then the life of 67 million people will be much better, and ultimately it will raise the prosperity of all Europeans. Obviously, it will lift the boat for all of us. Now I would like to say thank you very much to Kati Schneeberger. Maybe one closing remark, and also thanks for your leadership for organizing this event, and more to come from Vienna Goes Europe. Kati, the floor is yours for some closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you for participating. It was a very exciting discussion, and I wish you all a nice Sunday, and I'm sure we see each other again to talk about EU37.
Maybe also, Kati, to invite everybody to the European Day, because you make a very big effort on the 7th of May in Vienna, on the streets of Vienna. You transform the streets of Vienna in a European celebration together with many of the enlargement ambassadors already present. Maybe you can invite everybody to join that event. Just unmute yourself. No, you're not unmuted, but maybe it doesn't work. But on the 7th of May, Kati is organizing at Maria-Hilfer-Straße. That's only for the people in Vienna, obviously, but a very big European Day event. And that's, of course, fantastic if you can take time to join. It will be focused on Ukraine. There will be a lot of enlargement activity. And that's, of course, a big celebration. The 9th of May is a Monday. That's the European Day. Let me make the point, the 9th of May is not the Russian Victory Day, because we in Europe, we celebrate the end of World War II on the 8th of May. And the 9th of May is our European holiday, where Jean Monnet has declared the fundamentals of the European Union. So we will do it now on the 7th, but please make sure that whenever in your countries it's the 9th of May, that should be the European Day to be celebrated. And by the way, Russia will not win this war. Ukraine will win, Europe will win, we will enlarge the European Union, and by the way, NATO as well. And we will certainly win this battle against Russian aggression, Russian authoritarianism, and the aggression of Putin. And I always call this, close these events with Slava Ukraine. Please do whatever you can to support Ukraine's victory.